You mentioned the 200-week program, and this consisted of, as I recall, something like 194 or some large number of activities that
Yes.
occur throughout the cadets' 4 years. How do you assess the value of these leadership experiences, and how do you assess cadet performance in these experiences?
So we've just begun a brand new assessment program. And I talked earlier about the definition of leaders of character, how we measure that through what we call the stages of excellence, which are the first 13 core competencies within the Coast Guard leadership framework. We now, since we have that established rubric, we now use that rubric to assess the programs that are at the academy to look at how well those programs actually support us developing leaders of character. So this past summer, for example, we went and we looked at coastal sail training, we looked at T-boats, we looked at 2 cadre experiences. The cadre experience associated with AIM, our emissions induction mission, and also our CGAS cadre, which is our Academy Scholars Program. And we went in and we did 2 things. We evaluated the cadets against those 13 competencies to see how well they're progressing in their development in those competencies. We also evaluated the program with how well the program is incorporating LEAD. As you know, LEAD is the strategy we use to implement our guide to officer and leader development. And then we also are looking at how good or how effective is the assessment that we develop. The good news is that we conducted well over 2,500 assessments this summer. And so we know that the assessment tool is robust enough to help us to measure how proficient our cadets are becoming across the 13 competencies. We also know from evaluating the programs that the LEAD strategy that we're using, on a scale of 1 to 10, we're averaging somewhere around 8.3. So we're in the B+ range in terms of how well LEAD is being used as an implementation strategy for gold. Based upon those results from the summer, which was our pilot, we are now taking that assessment and we're bringing it across the academy. So this year within academics, for example, we're going to, in organizational behavior and leadership, we're going to evaluate the cadets across those 13 competencies in both the fall and the spring. In organic chemistry, we're looking at the first class cadets who are in organic chemistry. And then also in Nautical Science 4, which, as you know, is a Coast Guard Division Officer course, we're going to be using those 13 competencies and evaluating all of the firsties in the fall and the spring semesters. In athletics, this year we are using it for hockey, for tennis, for swimming, for men's basketball, softball, and a few other sports. And so as you can see, we're broadening this assessment across the entire academy. Our view here is to introduce, monitor, and improve. So we're looking at making sure that the assessment is robust enough so we can give not only the academy, but mainly the cadet, useful development feedback. And we're developing a common language and a common framework so that everyone who is speaking to a cadet is speaking to that cadet using the same language and the same vocabulary. So it's a big undertaking. You can imagine with 800 students, 140 faculty, and about an additional 200 or 300 staff, that this is a huge undertaking. But we're taking the steps to introduce it and to monitor how well we're doing, and we're learning and making changes as we go.
I thought I saw somewhere where there was sort of a 5-step evaluation process where you would go from needing improvement in certain areas to being competent to thriving. And that at least by the time a cadet reaches graduation, they would be competent in all of the areas that we would like them to be. Could you just comment on that?
Sure. So within that rubric that we developed, the stages of excellence, which are the 13 core competencies, we developed a progressive continuum for a cadet. So, for example, one of the 13 core competencies is accountability and responsibility. So the accountability and responsibility for a 4th class is not as is less than the accountability and responsibility required for a 1st class. So there's a gradation that occurs across there. And so for any column within this rubric, there's one for 4th class, 3rd class, 2nd class, 1st class. And then the way we evaluate the cadets is we look at them over a continuum. whether a cadet is progressing, which means they're making progress towards being proficient in that particular competency, that they're effective, which means they fully demonstrate that competency and have all the things necessary to say that they have accomplished proficiency, or they're thriving, which means that not only are they fully proficient in that competency, but they're a role model to others, that they direct others within that competency, and they teach people who are deficient in that competency. The expectation is that when a cadet graduates, that he is fully proficient in all 13. So this is going to be a little bit different for the academy, because being in the middle is where we want you to be. we don't want you to be a 7. I mean, it would be wonderful if everyone was absolutely thriving, but we also know that that's unrealistic.
Right.
But we do know that it is very realistic, and that we do expect people to be fully proficient. So the interesting thing there is when we went through this whole thing for the summer, we did see that there was a bias towards the thriving end of the spectrum. And we think that's because people were viewing this as an evaluation tool as opposed to a development tool. So one of the things we're going to be doing this academic year and next summer is to get people to understand that scale a little bit more, what it means from a development perspective, and that being in the middle is okay. We want you to be in the middle. That if you're to the left of middle, that you have development opportunities. If you're to the right of the middle, that you are exceeding expectations. But we fully expect that well over 90% of our people will be in the middle, because that's where the expectation is.
Where they need to be.
Yes.